Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to the Pop of Color Late Night Show, where instead of complaining about politics behind a desk, I talk about the music industry for bright and colorful artists. My name is Clara Charron. I run popofcolormusic.com. That is a blog on the music industry where I discuss branding and marketing for bands in colorful ways. I have a kitten who is doing all sorts of stunts with me today. He is the last one because the other two of my foster kittens got adopted yesterday, and I'm very, very happy for them. They're going together, so do check my Instagram because I have some pictures of them there from right before they left. There's a little video, a little Sky waking up and yawning with my own cat Louise. Anyone who's new, welcome, welcome, welcome. Anyone who's returning on this very fine Monday evening, or anytime when you're watching the rerun, welcome back. See, this is Ash. He's the last foster kitten, and he is a absolute snugglebug. If you live in Ottawa, it's not too late as of taping this to fill out an application with Furry Tales Cat Rescue. Hint, hint, he's lovely. Okay, so straight to the news this week. I have a gift for you in the description of the video. I found the link to the playlist that records the CD Baby DIY Musician Conference in Nashville this past month. I've got the link to the videos that were recorded, so if you have time, it's just taping all the conferences, the interviews. Just go watch it while you're cooking, watch it while you're doing all sorts of stuff, but keep a notebook handy because you'll want to take notes. I'm about halfway through and I'm just hitting gold. Well, then I'm just so excited that I wanted to share it with you all because there's no point having ego, there's no point keeping secrets in the industry. Okay, other piece of news, Bands in Town is now integrated into Amazon's Alexa. So this means that, Kitten, I am trying to host a show here. So this means that now people with Amazon's Alexa can now ask in audio, hey, when is this band coming to town? Or what time is this show on? Where is this venue located? And all this information is integrated into their system. I've been saying this for a while now, but audio is going to be the future of technology. So do make sure you are just aware of that when it comes to song names, and all sorts of things. If you have to choose names for things, if you get to name places, you want something that's easy to say out loud and easily recognizable. So don't write a love song and name it Love Song, Other little piece of news, there's new stats in Spain that are showing that 75% of recorded music revenue is now coming from streaming. Kitten! Manners. Coming from streaming, as I was saying. So this can mean one of two things. One, streaming premiums are going up, which is one of the things they found. People in Spain, in European countries, but especially in Spain, are more likely to want to pay for the premium versions of streaming services, that is, ones where they do not have to pay attention to commercials. They'd rather pay a small amount a month, like a Netflix or an Apple Music or the Spotify premium version, just no ads, and it's worth it to them. But it also means that CD sales are going down. It's a bit of both, but don't fight technology, don't fight the future. So now we got to figure out how to monetize this stuff. I quickly, before I go into the main feature of today, which is an interview, I want to draw attention to the new freebies page on my blog. Basically, I've been working on these content upgrades, these digital freebies, these downloads, these ebooks, worksheets, and stuff that come with a couple of my articles, and I just put links to all the freebies themselves in one place. On my blog, I've got a direct link in the description of this video. Do check it out. Do get on my mailing list too. That would be lovely. I'll send you a sparkly, fabulous birthday card in the mail because I'm like that. And without further ado, now comes this week's lovely, lovely, lovely interview. The main feature of the show. Professor Maya Greene is coming in to talk about personality types and how they would help you with your relationships in the music industry and just around you to be more productive and a more efficient communicator. Enjoy the show. Hi, Maya.
Hi, Clara.
Well, so nice to see you again. You got my birthday card.
I did, yes, thank you. That was really sweet. It's rare that people send birthday cards anymore, so it made my day.
That's what I thought, because no one else is doing it, so I'm going to stand out.
Well, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. I absolutely loved your presentation at Gray Fox. I think it changed my life.
Wow.
So I knew I had to get you on a recorded Skype call so that I could get the chance to talk to you and get you to present a condensed version of the personality types for my audience. So, let's begin. What is the Myers-Briggs?
Myers-Briggs was originally developed by Carl Jung, who was a psychologist in the turn of the 19th century, 20th century. He developed this idea about personality that essentially was picked up by Isabel Briggs Myers, her mother, Catherine Myers, and then Isabel Briggs Myers. They developed this way of looking at personality that was really type specific. And so essentially by answering a series of questions, you would be able to pinpoint where you fall on a spectrum with 4 different types. And most people are familiar with things like extroversion and introversion, and most people would probably be able to identify themselves there with a few, maybe, well, but I do this and I do this, so which am I? But there are other types that are a little bit less easy to pinpoint. If I were to say to somebody, are you sensing or intuitive? They would just look at me like, I don't know what that means. And so what the Myers-Briggs does is it says, well, yeah, right, I don't know. It says, well, you might be extroverted and you might also be feeling. So then how do those things connect to each other and how do they influence one another? And so what I do in my work, both as a professor of communication studies, I focus on interpersonal communication skills, but then also tying in the Myers-Briggs work, is I ask people to investigate who they are and how that impacts their communication. And in the case of the Gray Fox workshop and the work that I did at that music festival, it was how do these things then impact your role in a band, or if you are a touring manager, or if you're somehow involved in the music business.
A producer,
what are the impacts?
Trying to get the best performances out of the band in the studio.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, introversion, extroversion, that's the first one.
Yeah. All right, well, so I can sort of take them one at a time and explain, and I'm going to send you some images that you can add in, just because sometimes people like to see a visual display of it as well. Yeah. Extroversion is the gregarious, outgoing, talkative, expressive type. And now we're going to talk about these in extremes, right? Usually people they fall somewhere on a spectrum. But there are certain parts of us that really do fit into camp extroversion or camp introversion. So when you meet an extrovert, usually you know it. They have a lot to say. They're really engaged. They might approach you. They will probably initiate the conversation, and they'll certainly keep a conversation going. They say what's on their mind. They're usually, and this ties into the feeling component, if they're feeling something strongly, whether it's concern, anxiety, joy, whatever, they are going to talk about it. The extroverted person is going to want to talk about how they feel because that's their only way of working through it. They work through ideas verbally.
That's definitely me pacing back and forth running through theories and running through ideas and brainstorming just out loud to like my cats or my roommate or whatever.
Well, and the cats usually don't mind. I mean, sometimes cats will mind, but cats and dogs and, non-humans, they're like, we love your extroversion because do you see your cat sort of in the corner?
There's my cat, and I'm fostering 3 kittens, and one of them's lined up on the windowsill with my cat, and the other 2 are causing mayhem somewhere else in the living room.
Well, and they're reassured by your voice, so usually animals are. And so that extroverted quality can actually be a joy for the pets. But, like if your roommate's an introvert, and I don't know if your roommate is an introvert, but
definitely.
So your tendency to say what's on your mind and to brainstorm out loud and to express how you feel might drive that roommate crazy. My partner, and actually this is a little known fact, my partner was at the Gray Fox workshop. He was sitting in the audience, not saying a word because he's an introvert, but he wanted to see what the presentation was all about and kind of see me in action. And I was using him as an example in several parts of the discussion. He doesn't want to talk about how he feels. He wants to wait until he's fully ready. And sometimes that can mean sitting with a feeling for days. He doesn't feel the need to fill in quiet with chit chat. He tends to say only what's necessary when it's necessary.
When it's useful.
And that's one component of introversion.
Yeah, I would say like introverts, I've known a few who will only say something when they believe it has a lot of value in meetings, so they're often overlooked. Say in like a big group, they're often overlooked, but when they finally speak up, what they say is brilliant.
That's so true, and it's sort of our society really values extroversion, which is a real shame because the introverts have some incredibly insightful and important things to say, but because it takes them longer sometimes to speak up, or sometimes they have to find the space in a crowd of extroverts who everybody has something to say. The introverts sort of waiting for their moment. Yeah, it's hard, and so but when they do, they often they've really thought about like this is an important thing to contribute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I discovered I'm an extrovert at your meeting. I got told my entire life I was an introvert. I was like, oh my goodness, this makes so much more sense. I mean, I can be shy, but it doesn't mean I'm necessarily an introvert because there's a difference between introversion and shyness, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's a common misconception that introversion equals shyness. You could be extroverted and still have some anxieties about communicating in various contexts, especially when it's unfamiliar and you don't know the people that you're surrounded by. And so I have to admit, when I first met you, Clara, my impression was that indeed you were extroverted. But then, I want to also point out, just because somebody thinks that something's true of your personality, it doesn't really mean that it is. That's just how you might come across in certain situations. As individuals, and this is something that is so important, and the developers of the Myers-Briggs really reiterated that we get to choose. It's self-concept, who am I? That's the question. So we get to choose what we are. And that's why when you do take an assessment for Myers-Briggs, you're answering questions based on your true self and not really factoring in like, what do other people think of me? Because in the end, like they don't get to decide your personality.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another misconception with extroverts is they're always the party animals.
Yes.
They're kind of self-centered, always talking. The thing, like I would, like if I was self-defining, I'd be like the classy, the tasteful extrovert. So like if I see someone who's alone, I'll go up to them and gently bring them into the group. Or, I'm not dancing on tables in the restaurant. And of course my social media presence, my presence with my business, I amp up my natural personality. But I'm also okay with a quiet evening and we're reading a book.
Right. And I think that's where it becomes so fascinating, is that it's not just as simple as camp extrovert and camp introvert. And one of the things I did in that workshop was show the facets of each, because to really get into the heart of the Myers-Briggs type is to ask the questions, well, what parts of the definitions are not true to me? Most of us are going to maybe have characteristics that are opposite. So, for instance, one of the characteristics of introversion is intimacy. People who are introverted tend to prefer a smaller circle of friends. They don't want to be around big groups of people. And not because they're shy, it's not the same thing, but because that can feel overwhelming to an introvert. And I am, across the board, more extroverted than I am introverted, but I have intimacy as one of my introverted facets. So what in Myers-Briggs speak, what I would be called is an intimate extrovert. And, that's true for me. But somebody could also be, for instance, an expressive introvert, where they exhibit all the components of introversion, but they happen to also say what's on their mind. And one of the things that I think you'll show in the images is a slide that goes through all those facets on either side.
Thank you. Okay, next one. That would be N and S.
Yes. So S is for sensing. N is for intuition. And the reason we can't use an I for intuition is because the I was already taken with introversion. So when you are an S type, the sensing type, is kind of the rule follower. They have a tendency to go by the book. A great way to sort of think about, like, am I more S type or more N type, is when you get a new toy, like you get a new phone, you get a new device of some kind, or something that's maybe somewhat unfamiliar to you. The S type opens the manual, and they start at step 1. The N type doesn't do that. They kind of throw the manuals to the side.
Rip the instructions.
Yeah, they don't need they'll figure it out on their own. The N type is like, let me get into it and see how this works. I'll figure it out. The S type is like, no, we need to start with step 1, followed by 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's one area of sensing and intuition. Another thing to differentiate the two is sensing tends to really focus on what's right in front of them, whereas
so taking things literally.
What's that?
Would you say taking things literally versus the N type more metaphors?
Yes.
So then, when you listen to songwriters, would you say more S-type songwriters are the ones who write straightforward lyrics, and the N-types will do all the fluttery poetic metaphors?
Totally, yes. N-types are going to look more at the figurative language and love those metaphoric elements to songwriting. And not just songwriting, language too. They'll pull metaphors for everything. Whereas the S-type's kind of like, that's a little abstract for me. I'm going to need you to be very clear and specific. Yeah. And you said you're more N-type, Clara?
Definitely an N-type. I'm thinking of an article I wrote, how sync-licing deals are like Tinder dates. I was like, S-type would be, what the heck is this thing?
Yeah.
And downvote me on Reddit, and then N-types would be, let's figure it, let's learn how.
Right, well, and that's the thing I think is so true of N-types is sometimes the more abstract, the better, because the N-type really loves to take something that's far out and make sense of it in ways that make sense to them. And the S-type is like, no, you need to tell me what I need to think about this. They want something that's clear and outlined so that they don't. It's not because they can't think critically for themselves. It's that S-types are concerned about miscommunications. They're concerned about misinterpretations. And so if you give an S-type a metaphor, they're going to be like, well, but what if I misinterpret the metaphor? I need to know clearly what it is that you're trying to say.
So an S
So,
type
and that,
would be the best one
go
to
ahead.
give instructions to the band, for example?
Well, yeah, so like for instance,
But they're good instructions givers because they're clear, they're concise, and but also detail, and they help everyone understand what's going on without leaving anything to interpretation when it comes to the critical elements.
Yes. So if you're like a tour manager, for instance, and you're scheduling the dates and the places where you're going to be and the hotels that you're going to stay and all of the details of that, the S type might actually not want the long-term information. One of the things about S types is, again, they kind of like to focus on what's right in front of them. They'll want to see the schedule. They'll want to know what's coming up, but they're not worried about the show in Topeka. They're worried about the show in Boston, like tonight. Focus on what's right here and give me all the details that I need to know for right now. Whereas the N type is thinking about, well, how does the show in Boston influence the show in Montreal, influence the show? Like, they're looking at the big picture and how it all comes together. The S type might not want to make those connections or may not be as readily able to make those connections. They're sort of focused on the here and now. It's almost like
strategic.
I'm an N type. I'm going to use a metaphor right now. It's like the light at the end of the tunnel, okay? The S type wants a map. They see the light at the end of the tunnel, but how am I going to get there? I need a map that walks me through all the steps. The N type N type intuitive is totally focused on the light at the end. Like, I don't care how I get there. I know I'm going to get there. So bring me there.
What about when it comes to, say, playing chess? Would you have the N type being more on the overall strategy and the S type be capturing the most of the opponents and players within the next few moves?
Yes, that's a really great example. And actually, when you think about it, a lot of things we do in life, it's sort of like playing a chess game, right? Where the N type is going to be thinking about the whole picture, the big picture of the game, and strategizing in ways that are many, many moves out. Whereas the S type is solely focused on what's happening in the present. What the S type realizes is that, you know, you could strategize for the big game, but you're not taking into account the other player. And so the S type is working on one move at a time to get to the end of the game.
Because my downfall always, when I played chess with my grandfather tried to teach me, is I would strategize way out, and then he would do something, and I would throw off the whole.
Yeah, it's a great example again, and it's going to be influenced as well by the J and P type, which we'll get to at the end. And so just a little teaser of that is, if you are an N type, so you're an N type, you were looking at the whole game, the strategy to get to the end of the game, and your grandfather was going move by move. If you are a P type, perceiving type, then you are more easily able to go with that flow and to sort of be like, oh, all right, well, I got thrown off the strategy, so I'll just move to the next strategy, no big deal. A J type, somebody who's firmly rooted in the judging personality type, is going to be totally thrown off by that. They'll be like, wait a minute, you threw off my strategy. Now what do I do?
There's a lot of J types. My grandfather never let me win.
It's a good lesson, though, right? To really be reminded that sometimes plans fall through.
Yep.
We don't always get things the way that we think we're going to get them, but for some J types, that's a lesson hard learned.
All right, what's the third one? That's the thinking versus feeling.
Yeah, so thinking and feeling, I always like to say right away, like, just because you're a thinking type doesn't mean that you don't have feelings or that you're some, like, heartless person. It's not really.
And just
none
because
of
you're a feeling type doesn't mean you're not intelligent.
Exactly. That's the opposite side of it, too. It doesn't mean that you're just, like, all, mush ball of emotions.
All the feels.
It's how we make decisions. And a thinking type makes decisions with their head, whereas a feeling type generally makes decisions with their heart. And that's like the easiest and most sort of overview and vague way to look at it. Say that one more time.
Pop song writery way to phrase it, It's so wrong, but it feels so right.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. And actually, an F type because they fall in love all the time, despite what their head says. Right? Their head is busy going, "This is
He is
all
not right
wrong.
for you.
This person is bad for you. Don't go there." Your head's like yelling at you in the corner and shaking, and meanwhile your heart's like, "But I love them," the thinking type doesn't get themselves into the same sort of predicaments because their head's saying this is a bad idea, and they listen to their head. Oftentimes the thinking type is going to put like pro and con lists together. They're going to look at the benefits. They might even quantify things that to a feeling type.
Of my crush.
Yeah, like they might give point systems to things that like are totally rooted in the feeler's eyes. It's like, how do you quantify love? How do you quantify things that are led by the heart? But the thinker's busy making logical, rational, reasonable decisions, and the feeling type is busy being compassionate and empathic and heart led, and those things don't always match up. Now, certainly, just like the other types, we have these facets on either side. You can be a feeling type with some thinking attributes. Personally, I am what's known as a critical questioning feeler. So, despite the fact that I do lead with my heart and that I have a lot of empathy and compassion, I tend to ask the critical questions. Like, so again, this comes back to, how do I make my decisions? If I'm trying to make an important decision and somebody else is in the mix, I'm going to ask the critical questions to get to the best decision. And sometimes those critical questions, they might end up hurting somebody else's feelings, but it's really just trying to get to the bottom of something. Now, those elements on a thinking side, if you are all feeling, and if all your attributes and characteristics line up in the feeling side, you probably get your feelings hurt a lot. You take things very personally, because people who are all thinking, or who generally lean towards the thinking side, they're not trying to hurt your feelings. They're not trying to say things or do things that are going to be taken personally. They're just trying to be reasonable and logical and rational. And sometimes those things come across as hurtful to another person. Now, when it comes to, like, let's say you're traveling with a band, or even if you're not traveling at the time, even if you're just doing local shows, when you're writing songs, I think about any group dynamic.
Well, I'm thinking the songwriter and the performers are usually more on the feeling side. It's art. Must express myself.
Yes, and especially
like, I don't feel like performing tonight because my heart's not in it.
Right.
And then the bander's like, hey, the show must go on.
If they're extroverted, then that will definitely play a role as well. That they're going to lead with their heart, and it's going to be visible to everybody else. But imagine for a minute if you have a thinking songwriter versus a feeling songwriter.
In a co-write session.
And I'd actually be really curious about something like, Lennon and McCartney. I don't know their Myers-Briggs types. I wondered,
I'm sure you could Google it.
I'm sure you, yeah.
I found out I'm the same as Katy Perry, so.
Yeah. And but that kind of thing, it always, I question, how does it show up in those sessions if you have a feeling type who's writing from the heart and a thinking type who's asking questions about, well, how does this fit into the actual layout of the song, and who's asking some critical questions. The feeler type might be like, well, my vision is something that's so much more from the heart than the logical and rational perspective that you're taking on the song, that there might be some contention there. I think it's important for any songwriting team or any band that's working together. If you know these things about one another, then you're actually recognizing, oh, they're not trying to hurt my feelings. They're just being rational.
I'm thinking of that co-write session. It's like, hang on, and this phrasing doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't fit the plot. the words just sound cool together, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's where, like, really knowing this about one another can save a band. It can save a relationship, as opposed to just, you're a jerk, like, oh, you're not a jerk. You're just being who you are, and now I understand why
I'm pointing
you
out
are.
Inconsistencies in your love song.
Yes.
And last but not least?
Yes, the J and the P. So the judging and the perceiving.
Now, judging does not mean you are judgmental.
Not even close. Not even close. It's a common misconception, and I think it's a real shame. Nobody wants to be called judgmental or judgy. It's not about that, though. It's really how we interact with the world around us and how we sort of make decisions based on that information. And so a judging type is really far more structured and organized. They tend to be more methodical in their approach. They really love a schedule. And they also tend to be really
planful. For today, color-coded by priorities. You can tell I'm a J.
J type, for sure. And you actually showed that at
the festival. I had circled all the bands I wanted to see.
Yeah, you showed us the schedule at the Gray Fox workshop, and it's like I knew exactly what you were going to do for the day. And a P type doesn't even know where their schedule is, Clara. They've lost their schedule,
P type is a freelancer. It's Monday?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the J type, the judging type, and I mentioned this before, especially with that planful aspect, it's when you're playing that game of chess, if you have a plan for how it's going to turn out and something happens to thwart your plan, the J type doesn't always take that well. They tend to be really thrown off by that sort of thing. Now, the P type, on the other hand, thrives on it. They really enjoy the novelty and surprise that comes with, the flexibility of day-to-day life. I always say that the biggest difference between a J and a P, and especially in a working relationship, whether you are, in a band together, or you work together outside of the music industry, or you're in a romantic relationship together, any and all relationships, if you are a J type, the lack of a plan makes you anxious. Whereas if you are a P type, having a plan makes you anxious. And this is one of the biggest areas of conflict in all relationships. The J type in a band, in any sort of a music situation, is going to want to know what the schedule is for the upcoming year or upcoming months. Well, where are we going to be 3 months from now? The P type's like, I don't even know where we're going to be tomorrow, And I always think about it like when I go back to my romantic relationship, I'm more J and my partner is more P. And I love to have a calendar and a schedule, and I want to know what's upcoming. But I'm working with somebody who hates to do those things and will only do them if absolutely necessary. And it can cause a lot of anxiety on my part, but it can cause anxiety on his part when I try to lock down a date. So we have to sort of find ways to negotiate it.
Yeah, I remember all the tips you and the crowd gave me about my roommate and I because he's 100% P and I'm very much leaning towards J. He rolled out of bed 10 minutes before I called you and was like, I'll go for a walk, I guess, and was just putting on his shoes and making himself breakfast. I'm like, I've got to call at 10.
And meanwhile, I at 9:30 was ready to go, and I tested my video, and I was making sure I was all set up.
I was
a P type would not be ready.
Choosing my outfit.
Yeah.
Up at 6. It's just,
yeah.
I guess I do. But yes, working with him. I talked about it because we drove back to Canada after the festival, and I talked about this, and we figured out systems. So now what I do with living with someone who lives who's also a freelancer who lives by no schedule, set schedule, is I ask, do you have any plans today? When he answers no, or I think I'm going out with my friends at some point, I'll tell him what my plans are and when I need quiet in the house so that he can work around that. And I found that, instead, no need for subtlety, just laying it out there and making sure he knows when he needs to either not be in the house, so he's not going back and forth behind me while I'm doing a video recording, or if I'm having someone over for tea, those kind of things. But letting him know specifically, you can't be in the house at this time, or you'll have to be in your room, or I was planning on making dinner for 2 from this recipe, you're welcome for dinner. Knowing it, so there's no guesswork.
Yeah. And actually, I'm wondering, you said you're more intuitive, correct? More intuitive than sensing?
Yes, very end.
So that actually, it can be kind of hard because in your J-type mind, you want a schedule and you sort of know what that looks like. You're trying to plan your day or your week, and you're trying to work around somebody who has a P-type. But because you are more N-type, sometimes it is hard to define the specifics of that, where, you might have more of like a vague approach. I need quiet time around the house today. And whereas the S-type wants to know, what does that mean? When you say you want quiet time, do you need me to actually leave the house?
Oh.
Or do you just want me to be quiet in my bedroom for a couple of hours?
Yeah, no, I try to really... I think he's more of an S-type, or at least doesn't quite know what I mean. So he's like, I thought you wanted me to be quiet, so I was walking quietly behind you while you were on Skype.
Exactly. He takes it super literally, and you're like, no, big picture. Big picture. I need you to leave.
This is a nice day. Why don't you go for a walk?
Yeah.
Bring an ice cream bar down. I want to eat it, in like the park or something.
I think that's something that what the Myers-Briggs can do that's so amazing is like it will help to show us, what is it, where is it that I'm coming from? Where is this other person coming from? And then like now, how do we negotiate clearer communication based on that?
It really helps our dynamic just in this little apartment together.
Yeah.
Because, we've been friends for years, but there's a difference between being friends and then thrown into this many square feet together. Let's make it work now. Especially when you have 2 artistic people, neither of whom have very set schedules. I work from home. So it's like we're in each other's way a lot of the time. So this really helps the communication and the overall harmony of the household. And I think that's
great.
Really great for bandmates, interpersonal relationships, because of course the music industry is all about relationships.
It is. I think it's so important for all relationships. And I don't limit it to any one relationship, whether it's somebody that you're working with in an office, somebody you work with in a more flexible scenario, your bandmate, your roommate, your romantic partner, your parent and sibling. Across the board, I think some of the most common conflicts that take place in human lives are based at the core around personality differences. Let's say that you have somebody that you're living with and the conflict seems to always be about the messy kitchen. At the core, what that might actually be about is a more methodical J-type I'm a methodical J-type. I cannot start a cooking project in my kitchen until the kitchen is clean and organized. And a P-type might be like, well, you're going to mess up the kitchen anyway, so why does it matter? Let's just leave it messy. At the end, it's not about the dirty kitchen. It's not about the mess. It's about how we like to approach our tasks, Conflict itself is sometimes the way we approach conflict, it's a introvert-extrovert thing. The extrovert wants to talk about the conflict immediately. I have all these, especially an extroverted feeling type, I have these feelings. I need to talk about them right now.
Yeah, we can't go to We can't go to sleep without talking through the fight.
Exactly. Never go to bed angry. That's an extroverted saying, you know? Like,
that is
the introvert wants to go to bed angry. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Claire. I appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
You too. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.